Here we go. All right, good morning or afternoon for all of you here watching. I want to say thank you for being here. I am here with Lucy Kelly, who is a course creator. She's coming up on the 6th launch for one of her courses, and I just want to show you Lucy's page real quick. You can see her on screen, and we're going to navigate away from her for just a moment. But come in here, she does this handmade type focus for entrepreneurs who are trying to sell their handmade goods online. And initially coming here to her website, which you see, she has these gorgeous handmade flowers and plants right at the top. And I don't know. I love flowers and I love plants, and that just immediately made me happy to see. But I will let Lucy introduce herself and her business and tell us a little bit more about it.
All right, well, thanks so much for taking time with me today, Dustin. So yeah, my name is Lucy Kelly. I'm an artist and an entrepreneur from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I've had my own handmade jewelry business since 2010. It's called Belle Manili, and I specialize in upcycling vintage costume jewelry. I'm in my workroom now. I have a very small and full and cozy workspace in my home. And then in 2019, I launched Bloom by Belle Manili, and that is where I created a course to teach other handmade sellers how to bring their traditionally offline businesses online, meaning people who sell at art fairs and craft shows and vintage markets, those people who traditionally sell in person who want to have more of an online presence. I teach them marketing and content creation. So that was a venture I started in 2019, having no idea that in 2020, everybody was going to have to sell online because nobody had any markets to go to. So it's been a really interesting time for us, for artists in general, and for my business because, I've had to pivot some of my to-dos pretty quickly and, get ready to take in a whole bunch of new students who were ready to get online because they had no other course. So that's what I do in a nutshell.
Yeah, I can imagine that. I mean, one, good timing, but two, even just the little bit I know about, like my wife, who she is an amazing artist when it comes to like watercoloring, and she wanted to do handmade invitations for weddings at one point, and we tried to get her set up, and we were fumbling all over the place. So that sounds like that's a really big need, and you're on your 6th course launch, which tells me you've got some traction. So 6 launches since about 2019 is what you said?
I launched the first time January of 2020.
Okay, so right before the pandemic.
Yes.
That's awesome. So tell me about the course. Tell me about how it's gone, how each iteration has been.
So it's gone great. It's interesting. Like you launch and you don't really know what you're doing, and then you launch again and you know a little bit more. You launch again and you know a little bit more. So one of the things, I'm an Amy Porterfield student. I took DCA in September of 2019, which was how I got to create it. And there was a big emphasis on finding your customers and talking to them and understanding what it is they need and what it is they want. And the interesting thing about this is I'm kind of my own customer because I have this handmade business and I've had it for so long. But the interesting thing is, I'm so far along in my career that it was a little bit difficult for me. I felt like I was creating something that was so basic that I was really doubting myself. And what I realized was it's basic for me, who has been doing this for 11 plus years. It's not basic for someone who's never done it before. So, over the years and over these 5, now coming up on 6 groups of students who've come through, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about what they need, how they like to learn, how I can deliver things better for them. So each time I learn a little bit more. Each time, like the content essentially remains the same. Some of the tech changes as Facebook changes and Shopify changes. But I've really been able to hone in on like what phrases work best with them, how they like to get information. And really, for me, one of the best things and one of the most difficult things to do is setting parameters around what I teach, around what is included in the course, around what I can offer inside the course, and then what I have to say no to when it expands beyond what the course role is. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And that is such a valuable lesson that you just mentioned, is that each iteration you're learning, but also what you described there was what a lot of people call the expert paradox, where since you are a lot further along in this journey than the people you are serving, what is natural to you is like A to D. And so you say, oh yeah, A, D, F, Z, right? That's the whole alphabet. But they go, wait. What about B and C to get to D? And so we need to remember that it is a challenge as an experienced course creator or someone who has been working in your field a lot, that they are at that basic starting point, and that's reassuring, right? That's something that I actually struggle with too, because I'm like, oh, I want to teach them all this advanced thing, and they're like, just tell me how to host on Zoom. Like, how do I run my meeting on Zoom sometimes? And I'm like, oh, we can do better than that.
If you feel like you're not doing good enough, you feel like you're giving them information that's too basic. And an example of this just happened to me a few weeks ago with one of my students. I'm basically teaching marketing to handmade sellers, and we talk about, finding your perfect customer and creating content for them and having content pillars and posting things online other than just, what your stuff is. And we work about all this, and we were on like week 9 of 10 in this live group, and one of the students said, well, how do I sell my stuff to them? And I just like when do I post my stuff? When do I sell my stuff to them? And I was so taken aback, and I was like, but that's the whole class. Like, I don't know what you've missed. But what I missed was that I was teaching them all of the things that they can post and share and write about other than their product, assuming that they understood that they also had to add in their product. I never actually said that. So now I know that I need to tell them, yeah, you do need to post your things too. It's just you can't constantly post buy my thing. So something that I took for granted was assumed absolutely was not.
Yeah, that's an amazing story and an amazing example of it. And it kind of leads me into one of the things that I wanted to ask you to start. I know you're here to ask me questions, but the fact that we have an experienced course creator here, I want to highlight kind of one of the things that is harder for people to see as they get going, right? We don't necessarily have to be perfect, and one of the ways that we become really good, effective teachers is learning each time. And so one of the questions I want to ask you is, now that you've done this 5 times, is there any specific part of your course that you feel like is just kind of a sticking point? What you'll notice is each time you teach it, it's like, oh, I just feel like they're not, like, you just get the feeling like, I don't think they're resonating with this. Maybe you see a little engagement. Maybe you see people drop off around that point. These are all kind of things to look at. And sometimes when you just teach it once, it's hard to notice. But once you've done it 2, 3, 4, 5 times, you'll probably start noticing that there might be a couple lessons in there. So are there any lessons like that you've got that you want to kind of dive into? Or
Yes, there are actually. It's funny. So in this last round of students, I did 10 weeks of bonus live. The summer group will get 8 weeks because 10 weeks was a little bit long. And my course is divided up into, it's 6 modules technically, but there's 5 sections. There's where I start out with branding because branding's fun and everybody likes that and it gets them jazzed up and it's easy. So we start out with branding, then we do content creation, email marketing, social media, and then I teach building. I also have a module of where we release it after the last week, or like if they have an Etsy shop, but like that's kind of the end of it. But we started out. And I just
pulled those modules up too, so if you're wanting to kind of, that way the audience can have a visual of it as well.
Okay. So when we start out with branding, we're doing the fun stuff, the cool stuff, because this is really, as any experienced business owner knows, that's the cool stuff you want to do, but really you shouldn't do your branding until you have your business already established. Your logo doesn't matter. Your colors don't matter. None of that stuff matters until you know exactly what your business is. And what you think your business is on day 1 is not what your business is on day 100. It's just not. But my people, most of them coming in, they already have had their business established. So we start with that and get lots of engagement there, and everybody's excited. And then we move into module 2, which is content creation. And one of the first things that we do in there is we do a lot of work on finding our perfect customer, which is my term for, like Amy calls it, an ideal community. Everybody has a different term for it. But basically, the interesting thing about us as handmade sellers is a lot of us, pre-pandemic, of course, have an opportunity to actually be out in the world and meeting our perfect customer. So we are at shows, we're at markets, we're at fairs, and there's people coming into our booths all the time. And you start to recognize what the kind of person is who's buying your things. So you kind of, without really understanding that's what you're doing, you kind of know who your perfect customer is. Like I sell very girly, very gaudy, big, flowery, colorful jewelry. An 80-year-old man, not my customer. Like if he comes in my booth, he's lost or needs change. So, you know that in person, and we're working on how to do that online. So it's a lot of digging. We go through a lot of, here's how to find on Instagram, going through, people that you follow and clicking on their followers and seeing what they're, that whole very manual, very laborious digging process. And that is very confusing for people because they want, you want it to be an easy answer. You want it to be, this is how you find your people, bing, 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 and that's it. And that's just not it.
Right.
So I don't lose them there, but that's where they start to get confused when we go into digging and finding a perfect customer. And then I can bring them back because we do a lot of searching together. And then the next place in there is the content pillars, which I found they were taking, my students took it very literally. Like, I said, it's not like I had them come up with some content pillars so that they could start to find things other than their products to post about, because a lot of my students were, just posting pictures, like the one woman makes dog bandanas, and like every day she's just posting pictures of dog bandanas, and I'm like, well, you got to post something other than dog bandanas. Nobody wants to just look at dog bandanas all day. So, we talked about you could do different, organic pet treats or pet of the day or pet gardening thing, just different things around that. And they have such a hard time grasping the concept of posting. When I say posting, of course, I mean posting on social media, Instagram and Facebook, posting about things that are not directly related to their product. Like that concept was very difficult.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so I have your courses up on screen here. I'm looking here at the module 2, just the lessons. Repurposing content, perfect customer makes sense, and then content pillars. One of the things that just initially stands out to me, and I want to just mention it before I lose it as I dive into more of kind of the picture here, is everything you just told me about what was important was revolving around perfect customer and content pillars. But your content pillars here is a bonus lesson. And oftentimes bonus lessons are like, if I have time, if I'm interested, right? That is the fact that it says bonus tells me as a student that this is not something that I need to do to experience success. This is gravy, right? So
it's a bonus because I made the rookie mistake of numbering all of my modules when I made them. And that one came later, and it just didn't fit in. So.
I see. So, like in the actual thumbnail, so I'm gonna click into one of these a little bit more. I promise. Okay, so the thumbnail for the video says Module 2, Lesson 2, and so this is actually a great little tip that we are really tempted to dive into or fall victim to as course designers. Is we want things to be logical and ordered, and that is good. It should be logical and ordered. That's how the brain learns. But you trap yourself in your content by labeling it like that, and you don't necessarily need to. Right? You can just be like, okay, the next thing we're diving into is this, and then you could rearrange it. I did the same thing when I first started teaching one of my biomechanics classes, and like I built out all these videos, and I was like, oh wait, I think this one should go here, right? As we start teaching things, like you said, you're like, oh, this is maybe more important. And so my thought with that initially was maybe we should have the content pillars be your lesson 3 and the repurposing as a bonus, because repurposing, that sounds like a nice bonus. Okay, I'm making the important content, you're teaching me the important content, you can go through it, bonus points if now that you can do that, how do I start repurposing it? So again, you're the expert in this, and so you can always push back on me, but that's kind of one of my first thoughts with this. And I think it's important that we look at these because this is module 2, Lucy, and we don't want to lose our students in module 2.
Right.
Because you have 4 more really important modules that they need to get through, including like module 5 is Shopify and module 6 is Weebly or Square, right? This is setting up their shop, right? They can do everything perfect, and if they can't actually sell it, we don't want to lose them.
I don't necessarily lose them. They are there with me. So, and they did the content pillars. So I don't lose them there. They get stuck there. I could have spent 6 weeks in module 2 with them.
And so that is where the thing about learning is when you start hitting those friction areas, it slows you down. It puts you falling behind. If you get stuck on it, you're still wrestling with that concept as the course is moving forward. And so you might be losing more than you think, even just with like, if they really hit a roadblock that early on and they're already kind of taking that risk of like, ooh, I don't really know how to do this. I'm not sure if I can do it. And then like, boom, out the gate, there's something that's pretty darn hard for them to wrap their heads around. It's not that that's not important, but what I initially think is maybe we should try to come at it in a little bit of a different route, or maybe it's a good place for you to kind of do some outside the box teaching or applications, which could set them up for engaging later on. One of the things that came to mind is, so you're asking them to like work on how do you post content that isn't necessarily relevant or isn't necessarily what you're selling, but relevant to your perfect customer. Do you go through any like examples? Like, here is Tom who makes knives, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe he hand makes knives, and I knew a kid named Tom in high school who he made miniature sword replicas that were letter openers, but they're replicas of like famous swords from video games and stuff like that. So could you take them to his Instagram and kind of show and do a like breakdown? So that's one thing that comes to mind, is showing prime examples of it. And the other thing that this is gravy, and I think this would be a really cool thing to do depending on your bandwidth, but do you think you could have them a little earlier in the module, or like as they come into the course, share what their topics are? So maybe this person is selling those handmade letter openers, this person's selling paper flowers, this person's selling wedding invitations, and then what you can secretly do behind the scenes is choose one of them, kind of do a little bit of behind the scenes research, but then do what I would call like an implementation session. So this would be a live session where you are actually taking one of your students through it. So you could hop them on a call like this, or they don't have to be on the call with you, but you could be like, okay, let's go ahead, let's hop on Instagram and let's start finding your ideal customers. And so they get to see you, the expert, do this with their actual content, which for that person is probably like, oh wow, that's really cool. And for everyone else, be like, ooh, maybe she'll do that with me in another module. Like, kind of keeps them going, gets them excited. And you don't have to do it blind, right? If you do a little bit of a pre-course survey, which is one of the things I really recommend doing, then you can use those later. That's one of the things that I am planning to teach in my upcoming course. It's one of the things that I think a lot of people aren't doing, is you can kind of collect some interesting information and then like repurpose that later, and then it creates this like mind-blowing, like, oh wow, they listened to me, they heard me, like she's using my stuff. Like, so what do you think of that?
So I think this is embarrassing, but I actually do collect that information and I don't do anything with it.
Okay.
I do. How embarrassing. I do collect that information. I don't know. I don't know that I ask them what they make. I think so. Like whenever they join on my welcome sequence, one of the things that they get is they get a survey to fill out, and I ask them, their name, what they prefer to be called, their address and phone number, their website, all that kind of stuff.
Okay, so that's great, but that means you're on the first step, so you could change that survey a little bit. If you want to make it a bit more organic, if you've got a group, you could do a post where you're like, welcome to the group, tell everyone what you make and share a photo of your most recent
Oh, we do
that
something. Too. We do that too.
So there you go. So what
you
can do is you can look at it and then okay, Tom makes sword replica letter knives, and then you take that. But that is one of the really important things to keeping students engaged is they need to see the relevancy for them throughout the whole thing. And when you can drive that connection, sometimes you could straight up leverage that connection by making it directly. Tom, I saw that you're making knife replica letter openers, so let's do a dive into Pinterest or Instagram for you to see what other people are posting or who your customer might be interested in looking at, or those kind of things that you're doing. But then Tom goes, wow, she actually looked at those social media posts that I did 2 weeks ago, and everyone else there goes, oh wow, she's actually engaged with us, she's invested with us. So there's 3 types of connections that you really want your students to have. You want them to connect with the course creator. I call these the 3 C's: course creator, you, the content, which is clearly your content, and then community, so connecting with the other people in it. And we really want to have a plan for those 3. And so that kind of double whammies it in terms of you're driving this community connection by doing these community posts, but then they connect with you because they know you're paying attention. And we all like people to pay attention to us, right? We all like to be seen. And then it drives the content connection when you actually are taking what they are doing, the hard work, and you're doing a little bit of, you're holding their hand through it for them. That you're giving them a little bit of a win and teaching them through it. So I really like those kind of implementation strategic ideas. It's one of the things that I encourage a lot of people to do.
Great. I wrote that down. That's an excellent idea.
Okay, good. And so what do you think of that and trying that with that early module? I think that
would be valuable. I do a version of that showing them mine, but it would, of course, be much more effective, using one of theirs. So, I can totally work that in.
Again, it's okay to stumble a little bit in there because, for you, you're the expert. You've been doing this for so long that it's going to come easy. You know the accounts to find. You know what you're looking for. You know, the thing to highlight because you know your area, your expertise, and your customer.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't make you a bad teacher to what that does is that makes it look so smooth and so easy and flawless. And then when they go to do it, they're like, oh man, this is harder than she made it look. And so it's okay if you stumble a little bit with them. You're like, okay, I have no expertise in making letter openers and of knife replicas, so let's dive into this together. And then they'll see okay, there is some struggle here. It's not perfect freeform, but here's how I'm doing this, and I can get results because Lucy, who has never done this, got some results with it. And like I said, you can set yourself up for success by doing a little behind the scenes digging so you know what key terms to search for or something like that.
Yeah, that's great.
Perfect. All right, and so that's module 2, which we want those strong, quick wins. You want to set them up for kind of these unexpected things like that early because it goes into this variable rewards. That's why Facebook, social media, all these things are so interesting to us and addicting is we don't know what's coming next. So if you throw something like that and ooh, I'm going to use your content to teach a lesson live, that all of a sudden they all perk up.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. That totally makes sense.
Doing that early is fun. And I think, the first module, you don't necessarily want to do something like that because they're still getting their feet under them.
Well, they come in and share, like I have them make their brand board, and they come and share those in the group, and that we get so much engagement, and everyone shares their brand board, and it's exciting because that's like a really fun, easy thing to do. So that definitely like kicks it off in the right way. And then I hit them with content creation.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the most underutilized things is we create these great, engaging social media posts and then never come back to them. But you're teaching this, and my guess is when you ask them to share that, that's providing content for the rest of your modules. And then it becomes really relevant to them and connected to them. So try to leverage some of that.
Okay, thank you. That's great.
Yeah. All right. So what else? I kind of steered you in a direction on that one when I knew you were a ongoing course creator, but what else is coming to mind in terms of you're approaching a launch? What can I help you with?
So I don't really, my friend Rhonda, who also had a hot seat with us, always talks about her course. I think she does like a 90% completion rate or something like that. So when I went in and I looked at my completion rate, the completion rate actually wasn't, I don't know what we consider a completion, like 100%. Nobody's going to take 100% of the course because not every module applies to them. Right. So, really what I'd like them to get through are those first 4 modules. The 5th and 6th module, the Weebly and the Shopify, some people might have that and they don't really need that. But what I wonder, what I think is, is there a way that I can present the information to them that would be easier and not doing it for them? You know what I mean? Like there's a fine balance between I need to show you how to do this and I'm not going to do this for you. Like I have templates and swipe files that, like this last group, I gave them in my group, I show them like my welcome emails and I show them my post-purchase emails. I do have a membership. It's a paid membership for people once they get past. They get 8 weeks of free bonus, and then they get lifetime access to the content. But if they want more live support, they can join the membership. So there were things that they asked about that I gave them support on, but that really weren't. Those are things that I do in my membership. But I want them to be writing their emails. So that's why, the branding we lay out because that's the fun part, and they want to do it. But then that content part is the foundation for their social posts. It's the foundation for their email marketing. It's the foundation for their website. So, while they can use a template for format, I don't want them using the template for content. And I know a template for content is what they wanted. So, I felt I didn't want to disappoint, but I also didn't want to set them up for failure because giving them a template that they just, or a swipe file that they just copy and paste isn't going to be useful.
Did you tell them that?
I did tell them that, and I didn't explain it in those terms, but I said what I send to my customers isn't going to be what you send to your customers because we have different people. So, all this time that we spent digging up these topics and these pillars and finding out about these people, that's the stuff you write about. I just sent an email this week to my audience, to my Bloom audience, about my daughter lost her tubes, and I sprayed a $2 bill with glitter hairspray and printed out a tiny note and rolled it up. That's got nothing to do with my course, but my audience as artists totally resonated with it. And that is, I was trying to explain to them, that's the kind of thing. I wasn't selling them anything. I wasn't wasn't talking about my course. I wasn't doing any of that stuff. It was just pure connection and entertainment. And just that point, I thought I was making the point well, but that point is not always received as well as I think it should be. So that's
So
struggle. That's a struggle. Moving forward is something that I want to be better at.
Yeah. Learning context is really important to learning. And so when we are doing something very intentionally, like you just said, I hear you. I hear that you want this to be easy, right? That's what they want. They don't want your swipe file. They don't want your words. They want it to be easy, and that's what they've seen done as being easy. And the thing is, that's not easy, doesn't always get them the results, right? You don't have to necessarily tell them that. But what you'll want to tell them is say, I am doing this intentionally. I'm not giving you this written email because you'll get 1 or 2 good emails out of it, and then you're going to be lost. And I want you to finish this course confident in your ability to write one. And so you're being transparent, right? And that gives them context into how to approach this. Okay, she's not just saying, here's the email copy, go copy it. They're learning from you, right? And so if that's the message they're getting, then they're like, oh, I only have one, and, right? They're not going to see those results. So you can say at the start of the lesson, be like, okay, the goal of this one is I really want you to be able to write good content that is relevant and interesting without being reliant on swipe files or something like that, and then dive into it and just be like, I'm going to show you some examples. I am going to give you one template so that I don't like templates. And this is kind of one of the things that I am still learning in terms of what I've learned in teaching is to be yourself, and you really need to teach from your own content. You need to work from your own content, which is like but I don't know if you've ever gone to a presentation, or maybe someone in the audience could resonate with this, but you've had a professor at university or in high school who clearly got their PowerPoints from the textbook. They didn't make them themselves, right? Which, by all means, that textbook PowerPoint is everything you need to know. It's formatted perfectly. It is what they need to teach the course, but it doesn't hit home because it's someone else's work in terms of you're trying to teach it. So you might see them be like, they kind of look at it and think, or it's just not hitting. And this is one of the things I learned really on in my teaching career is that I got PowerPoints from more experienced instructors, and I tried it. I used their stuff, their script, their lesson plan for the first 4 or 5 weeks of the semester, and I had to stop and tell my students, I'm like, okay, this isn't working. I tried to do this because this is how the other professor who's been teaching this same class has done it for 20 years, and he does great at it. It's not working for me. I can tell it's not working for us. And so I say all this to, we learn from examples. We want the easy way. People want to sell swipe files. People want to share templates. And a lot of that is great, but when it comes to personal stuff like email marketing and content marketing, it's got to be authentic to who you are. One of the ways I try to apply this, and this could be a huge mistake. So again, I'm teaching expert, not business expert, but I cannot stand long form emails. There are people I follow and love and respect, and I'm on their email list, and it's a huge long email, and I never read it. It's too much. And so I don't want to send those to my audience. I don't want to be bombarding them with emails, but every business guru tells me I need to. So what do I do? Do I do what is inauthentic to myself? And if that's where you're like, it would be inauthentic of me to just do all of this for you and give you these. I know that you need to create this authentically from yourself. So how can we go about doing this? And things that come to mind is you could ask them to do a challenge where you say, okay, this week I want you to write the first few paragraphs of an email blast from a personal story in your life and share it in the Facebook group. So everyone replies to it with just 5 or 6 sentences on a story, right? And so you can guide them through how to make it personal, how to find it. They're not sending it out to the audience, so it's low risk. They could kind of get some feedback. They could see how it goes. But that might be something to do in terms of engagement, is take your content and actually have them try to work with it. Be like, okay, the goal here is to come up with a story from this week that is relevant to your people. And so I'm going to challenge you on the Facebook group. Go to this post. Let us know who your ideal audience is, and then give us the first 5 to 10 sentences of an email story. Or if that's all your email story is, like, do it. Does that... What do you think of that in terms of, like, trying to get them away from the reliance on templates? Because you want them to be able to write their content for years to come, not... You can't provide 52 weeks of templates, and that only gets them through a year.
Yeah, that's really great. We I think we got so stuck on the pillars that we kind of had to move forward, and then there were other things that we talked about, but I didn't do that. I think that's a great idea. This idea of storytelling and things like that is it's something that we all do, but it was really hard for me to get them to understand using that as like a marketing and a sales piece, because it doesn't have to be markety, it's just natural. Like one of my students arranges a trip for her friends, and they go to Paris every year. And she didn't understand why that would be interesting content, because it has nothing to do with her business. And I was like, because nobody does that. Because that is so awesome, and nobody does that, and everybody wants to hear about it.
And we want to know... I saw someone say this just on social media. Maybe it was Steph Crowder. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her. But she said, we want to know the person we're sending our money to. Like, we want to see the person we're sending our money to. We want to connect with them. So yeah, that's an important part.
I put a very big focus when I'm selling the course, and when I'm, presenting myself. I put a very big focus on that my teachings and my business are relationship focused. And I do use my own business a lot as an example, because my business, my handmade business, has seen incredible success, and I've had... I reconnected with my high school sweetheart, and we got married, and we had a baby right away. And these people in my audience walked through that with me. And again, not really related to my business, but they're so ingrained in that now, I sell jewelry. I could start selling, I don't know, tea tomorrow, and they would still buy it from me because of that relationship. And that's what I'm trying to teach these people, is when you form these relationships, you're essentially acting like these are all your friends. So you don't have to tell them, what time you went to the bathroom this morning, but you do need to share a little bit of yourself beyond just, here's the thing that I sell. And she thought that was too intimate. She felt like that was too, well, that's something I do in my personal life. And I said, well, you don't have to, give your itinerary. You don't have to tell people when you're out of town. It's the experience of, this is the thing that I do. And you could talk about what it's like to plan an itinerary, or what things you're supposed to pack when you go, or, what things they have in Paris hotel rooms that they don't have here, any number of things. But they do struggle with that level of intimacy, and it is such an important part, especially because as handmade sellers, we physically make our products. So there's already a super personal connection there.
I was going to say, is that if someone is looking to buy a handmade kind of thing, they're not, they already have that value in purchasing from a small, real person who's putting time and effort and love and work into this thing. Otherwise, they'd just run out to Walmart and find some, right? So,
exactly.
The people who they are selling to already value that, so it needs to be there. That's awesome.
Exactly. So I need to do a better job. I thought I was doing a good job, but I apparently need to do a better job at strengthening that connection. That your people, somebody who's going to buy something handmade, especially someone who's buying it online, already has that foundational connection with you because you're a maker. If nothing else, because you're a maker and because they want to support makers. Yeah.
So let me ask you this: in terms of, I haven't gone through the content. How are your are you doing videos? It looks like, how long are they? I might pull one up here and just kind of give it a quick look here in that content creation. So that's kind of where we already are.
There's one lesson in there that's a long one. The PC one there is a long one. Most of them are between 10 and 15 minutes. There's one that's a long one, and I say at the beginning, this is a long one.
Okay, so Module 2, Lesson 1 is 30 minutes. Module 2, Lesson 2 is 20 minutes. Lesson 3, 13 minutes. Content pillars, about 5 minutes. So I'm just going to click in and just kind of click through the video here real quick, kind of see.
Or some pod, which and.
Okay, so it's very typical, and I don't say that in necessarily a negative way. This is very much what we see a lot of people do, is the voiceover of the slides. Mm-hmm. So one of the things is, so in my biomechanics class that I teach, it's a university class, but I brought it online so we can make more meaningful time when we're actually together in class. And so I took topics that I would normally take like an hour to lecture, and I said, how do I get this under 10? So under 10. And let me tell you, there are some
under 10
lessons,
what, minutes?
Minutes.
Oh.
And so there are some lessons that I'm like, I cannot teach this, I cannot explain it in that under 10. And my students let me know. Oh boy, it'll be 11 minutes and I will hear about it. And so one of the things with attention spans in online learning is it has to be small. It like a long video is over 10 minutes. So when you said you keep them short in that like 15-minute range, like that's a long.
Those are the, like, if you look at the rest of them, those are like the two longest ones.
No, and that's okay. And I'm not trying to.
But yes, I guess if 10 minutes is long, then they're all long.
Right, and so what you're seeing is that they're not making these connections you want them to, and what that kind of tells me, and especially just hearing you talk passionately about it, I completely got it. Like, I completely got it. And my thing is could you spend less time on those lessons? And this is just kind of a question for anyone watching this, is when you are designing those lessons, instead of putting that story, instead of putting that passion soapbox piece at minute 12 of your video, could you do a live session on it? And so you teach them the basics in the video, and then you do the examples, the story, the passion chats, as a live session that week. And people are like, oh, well, that's another live session, and that's more time. But also, you don't have to rehearse it, you don't have to script it out, you don't have to film it, you don't have to edit it. They'll still get it on the replay, because Lucy, you just hit your passion soapbox, and I totally get it. And that's the thing, is we have these passion soapboxes, and if they heard you talk about it like that, I think they would get it. And I don't want you to fall into the trap of like do it live and then call it a video and like put it up there. Like, you'll want to do that passion soapbox for every class, every time you launch it. And it's okay, you'll get into a script. Like, the more you do it, you'll tell the same joke, you'll tell the same pacing, like you'll figure out what works with these live sessions. And I know there's such this push for these to be completely like hands off. You put the content up, they go through it, you show up for Q&A, and like, whew, they've got it. But you are hearing yourself say that they are getting stuck in places that you're giving them everything they need and they're not getting it. And what that tells me is it's the format, it's the delivery, it's if it's there, we got to get it to them in a different way. So that's kind of my first thought on some of these is you might have students, again, you want to be transparent, be like, okay, I'm keeping these short because when we come together to talk each week, I'm going to go through those examples. I'm going to tell the stories. We're going to dive deeper into it. And you'll have those replays. So if the people can't make it live, if they don't want to show up live, it'll be uploaded. They can watch it, but then they still see all that passion. They still hear it. And there's more of that connection strengthening too. So that's something to consider. It's very different than what a lot of courses are doing.
When they're going through the videos, though, like, Like when I'm learning,
Mm-hmm.
I like the examples. Like I'd like to look at something and then I like to see an example of how it goes, and that's kind of
Yeah.
how I teach. Um, so only simply because this is not how I learn. Like I would wonder if
Yeah.
that would be taking anything away from it. Like when I want to include like a little bonus section of storytelling, which seems tedious and unnecessary. I don't, as I say it, like,
Yeah. No,
no.
that's great. That's a great question here. And so it's not like it's every single one. It's not like every single piece that you need to do, but when you're coming up against these topics that you're like, I've done this 3 or 4 times, they're just not getting it. That could be a topic, and it's okay for your format to not be exactly the same every single time. Like, it's okay for them to, like, module 3 is a little bit different than module 5. That keeps them engaged, that keeps them interested, that keeps them like, ooh, this is a little bit different. Like, the pacing, the kind of like, yeah, there's some modules, but like, oh, this one's different. We're gonna do a live session on this topic because I know my students in the past get stuck on it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all you gotta do. You know it's a sticking point, so like, let's talk through it live. And you can still give examples, like, but make them kind of short and sweet, and then do bigger passion soapbox type chats live. And it doesn't have to be every single lesson, it doesn't have to be every single module, even like changing it up, right? Module 2, you went through someone's personal content. Module 3, you did a live breakdown or like a live chat about this sticking point. It's okay if those aren't perfect, but it's good that you're reflecting on like what works for you, and just like ask yourself, a lot of people can't sit there and just, right, like, who's your customer, who is learning from you? Are they busy parents whose kids are running around? And like, for example, when I went through DCA, I would take the lessons to the gym with me to have uninterrupted time to listen to it. So
Yeah, I heard you say that on the webinar, like a way to make us all look bad. Yeah. I, like, not only did I not listen to it, I definitely don't go to the gym. And I'm like, okay.
well, other
I
people
get
sat
it,
down
though.
and
I
watched
get
the
it.
videos, right? So you, it's good, like, maybe find out a little bit more about how they're in, like, taking it in. Are they sitting there at one time? I don't know what Kajabi does in terms of like analytics. Like, does it show you how much of the video they're watching?
It
So
does.
if they're okay, so if you're seeing like those longer videos, if they're only watching like the 12-minute, 13-minute of the 20, then you're like, okay, what's going on around that 12 minutes? And that's worth looking into as well. That's awesome that they give you that kind of like actual
I think they do.
analytics.
They tell you how much of a video is watched. I have to look in it closer.
A lot of them do that because a lot of them have things like they don't make the next lesson available till they get through all the videos. Like, some platforms do that, so that means they have to be measuring it at some point.
Now, that's an option in Kajabi that I don't do. Do you
No,
think that that's worth exploring? Because I thought that would just make people mad.
I think it would too.
Okay.
Yeah, so I say that more that they're monitoring that, so like hopefully you'd have access to that information. I am not necessarily a fan of, especially when people are choosing to pay their own money, like limiting the content to them, like dripping it out over a week or two to kind of like, or like each week it becomes available, but like saying you can't do this until you sit there with that makes them want to play it and walk away, like just to like get everything. So I definitely would not
Okay.
recommend experimenting with that.
Yeah, I mean, we're not reinventing the wheel here. I'm just teaching
Right.
marketing. So it's not like it's not like they're going to be blown away if they see it all at once. And there are some people who, like, they've got their branding part nailed down, so they want to work on other pieces. So I always just make the whole thing available.
Okay, right from the start, huh? I mean, yeah, I guess that's what I was seeing there. Yeah, and you can just let them know, like, you can take it at your own pace, but together we'll go through it at this pace, and I think
Hmm.
that's...
Yeah, that's what I do. I tell them, like, this last time we did 10 weeks, and each thing, I had it planned differently, but it turned out each module we did 2 weeks on. So the Shopify and Weebly and Etsy stuff, like that was where they, like you talk about falling off, they completely, they still showed up, but they didn't ask any questions about that, which I thought was interesting because I usually get a lot of questions about that, but they still wanted to be talking about social media stuff, and they still want to be talking about all that other stuff. So that's why this next group, I shortened it down to 8 weeks. I do a weekly live Q&A on Thursdays, but I can add in like a weekly, no, probably not weekly, I'm not going to do it every week, that's a lot. I could add in a periodic, deeper dive lesson on those things.
Yeah, and that's where you need to ask what works for you and like what is working for your students. And if you're going to add something like that, like we were talking about earlier, scale back somewhere else. Like it's okay to scale back in a different area, one for your time, but also for your students. And even just kind of what you're saying here is another point that I think is one thing that we overlook. Cohorts are really different. No matter how hard we work to sell to the ideal customer, the person who meets these qualifications and has these every group has different struggles. Every group has different strengths. Every group is going to go at different paces. The most important thing is that you, the instructor, see them and see that. It's okay to say, hey, we're going to stay on this one for an extra week, and I'm going to go through these last two a little fast. I'm trying to think of, even in what I've taught in higher ed, I can't remember a semester where I've stayed on the same pacing like as my initial schedule was, right? Sometimes I could just tell they're really struggling with something. So let's stay here a bit. Let's push this off. Maybe this part's not as relevant, so I'm going to say, hey, later in module 4, that's not as relevant. It's more of a how-to guide that you can click through and watch it, so like you don't need me as much. So we're going to spend a little bit less time on that in a couple weeks to spend more time here. It's okay, and your students will appreciate that. Your students will say, oh, thank you. Like, I am being seen, I'm being heard, and she is valuing where I'm at.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, they are very different. It's funny how, like, you would think, yeah, I'm teaching the same class, so I should get relatively the same people, and they are very different.
Yeah, and if you've never run a course, the same course at the same time, and again, this kind of happens in like teaching in higher ed, I'll be teaching 2 sections of the same class, completely different, and that's hard.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm telling the same jokes, I'm telling the same stories, like, and one group's getting this concept but not this one, and vice versa in the other. So groups and cohorts are really different, and it's something to keep in mind. From what I'm seeing in the online course creator space, especially because we want it to be this kind of passive income on repeat, go to evergreen, we get a little too rigid to the point where it doesn't serve our students. And word of mouth is huge, right? Testimonials are huge, so like the better we could serve them, the better like they'll serve us in a way. And so we are running close to time here, and so I want to respect your time. We've still got like 7 minutes or so, but what else is burning on your mind that you'd like to take some time to chat about before we finish up?
So one of the things, I guess, in my just thinking of how you do what you do, I currently don't use anything like closed captioning or, like I do have a PDF guide and stuff that goes with it, but I don't do any transcripts or anything like that. I had my one webinar, a woman came on in the chat and she said, I'm deaf. And like a complete goon, I said, oh, I'll give you a transcript later. I had no subtitles. Because I was so hungover, which is crazy because I'm a speech pathologist. So, like, I don't know why my friend messaged me. She was like, you know that you're answering her, like, you have to type in the chat. So I did. I found a place online that I could submit the video, the recording, and get a transcript, and it was a hot mess. I mean, it was just like word vomit. And I didn't know what to do with it because I know this sounds terrible, but like it would have taken me hours to sit and sort that out. I didn't have time to do that.
Yeah.
So I kind of shaped it up the best I could and put it up there, but like what do people do? Like, what's the thing to do there?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways. So you said a webinar. Depending on what service you're using, I know there's Otter.ai, which is a really strong one. They do a pretty darn good job with the automatic transcripts. Otter.ai is automatically built into Zoom for free. So if you're doing your webinar using Zoom, you can just click live transcript. So I can just like I literally just clicked it for us, and you can see it coming across the screen. The audience can see it coming across the screen, and what it will do is it'll actually have a full transcript at the end. So if you're doing it's that easy with Zoom, which we want to make these things easy for us because it allows us to serve people. I'm also of a little bit of a different mindset of something is better than nothing. That we need to respect that these people who are coming in with disabilities are fully intelligent human beings who are capable of understanding context, right? So there is a big part of language is context. And so if there's a mess up of a word, like, it's not going to completely derail them. Yes, it's not perfect, but chances are they're still getting more out of it than they would with nothing. So I do like Zoom's auto transcription, pretty solid. It uses Otter.ai. Otter.ai will, I mean, it even picked up Otter.ai the right way. It will integrate with other.
For my webinar, but I do use Zoom for my meetings, so I can do that to get transcripts for our Q&A.
Yeah, and you might check Otter.ai might actually, it uses like a token, so a lot of other ones can. So if Demio can grab that token, there can be a transcript available like live with Otter.ai using that. So that might be something to look into. In terms of post-recording software, I'm a big fan of Descript.com. I don't know if you've used that. They're really strong. It's kind of crazy some of the things they do, but what you can record your videos, you could record your audio, you can upload pre-recorded stuff, and what it does is it transcribes it and allows you to edit it like a Word document. So you don't have to listen. You can read and scan, which will probably go a lot faster. That's something that if you can afford a VA, you could send it off to a VA to do that. Look through those. Rev.io is another option. That one is like $1 or $1.25 per minute. So that's kind of another piece that you need to consider. But do you mind if I share the cost of your course when I was looking at that?
No, go right ahead.
So the cost of your course was $400, and the hearing problem is about 1 in 5. So 1 in 5 Americans has a hearing impairment, is roughly. So if you have 100 people, that could be 20 people who benefit from that, which 20 times 4 is what, like 400 times 20, $8,000? You could probably have it perfectly transcribed from Rev.io for less than $8,000. And so if you are able to recruit that many more people because you offer that, that means they're choosing you over the competition in one way. So that's one way to look at it. Or even a VA. You could probably have a VA. You load everything up into Descript, or even give them the files, have them read through and edit it in Descript for probably even a lot less. Like, because $1 a minute is what, $60 an hour? You could probably hire a high-end VA for $20 an hour to do that for you, and that saves you even less. So there's almost like, if you took that time invested, especially now that you're on your 6th launch, you've got your content pretty locked in. Like, you're feeling good about it, you know where it's at, and so a few launches in, maybe it's time to invest $1,000 into getting it all transcribed really well, because 3 customers could recoup that for you. And my
And
guess...
then do you tell people, like, do you use that as a selling point, that you have that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I think that's going to be really important for people to start doing that. Forbes said it's the online course business is one of the like fastest growing industries worldwide right now. I've been saying, I did this podcast with a guy named Paul, and one of the things that he said is back in 2011 there was an app for that. 2021 there's a course for that. And 1 in 4 people in the United States has a documented disability. So that's actually like documented, and right. So it could even be higher with people potentially undocumented or just working with it. And so if you could potentially increase, like think about your last launch, or what if I said you could increase your launch size by 25%? That's a big number.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's a big number. And so for you to be able to say, like, this content is completely certified, and that's one of the things that I want to do with my business, is I want to certify courses. So I want to have a list and say, hey, you go into these, and it's going to be completely accessible. So they have done the work. They have invested. It has been independently reviewed. And that could be something you could advertise. That could be a nice, shiny gold badge on your website that you're like, hey, this is accessible. So you will probably get, and like we just said, if you get 3 people in over the next year or 2, right, that you're using this content before really need to revise it or something, you've probably earned more than you invested into it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's going to be more and more courses, and so the more and more you stand out and better served. And the thing is, these communities are really well connected. So that woman who was deaf likely has deaf friends, likely is in other communities. And if she's like, oh, I took this course with Lucy and like I was able to get it all. She had everything. She had all the transcripts. She had all the captioning. Like the live events were transcribed. It was perfect. She's going to be telling people about that.
Yeah,
and so,
that's a great point. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in it, and yeah, it might cost some money. But Lucy, you're on your 6th launch, which tells me you're doing well.
I wasn't
not
so worried about the money. It was that,
right.
like, I did that one, and I'm like, well, this is garbage. Like, I'm not going to give this to someone. It was terrible.
Yeah. Well, what you can do is, even if you just want to see what Otter.ai is, I've had it running for this conversation, and so every time I've looked at it, it's done pretty good.
Okay.
But yeah, check out Descript, because it comes up like a text file, and you could probably edit that or send it to a VA really quickly to edit quickly.
All right.
And one of the really cool things about transcripts that I don't hear people saying, transcripts can be translated. And so if you have audience members whose English might not be their first language, or somehow got in your, like, chances are you're not going to have someone who completely speaks only another language really become one of your followers. But if someone whose English second language is, and you offer them transcripts, they likely, there are softwares out, like Google Translate could do it and do a pretty darn good job. I know I offer the transcripts, and I have students who speak Spanish as their primary language, and they will take the transcripts and just transcribe it, and then they will watch my videos with the translation next to them, and so they can...
Oh. That's interesting.
Yeah, so there's some cool things you can do with it.
Yeah, there are. That is cool.
Yeah, so Lucy, we are on our time, and so we actually do have a few viewers in here. We had up to 4 at one time, which is great. But is there anything you'd like to tell anyone, anywhere you want to direct them? All of Lucy's social media handles and her website, everything are down in the description right now. You could go click on them. But anywhere specifically you'd like them to go to connect with you?
Yeah, well, Facebook's always a good place to connect with me, but I'm actually running a challenge for social media engagement that's leading into my next launch. So they can go to bloombydelmanili.com/YBB challenge. It's your blooming business challenge. It is a 5-day challenge coming up. I'm sorry, it's a 7-day challenge coming up starting next Friday, where they're going to get video instruction on how to set up a business page for their Facebook, how to set up a business page for Instagram, and then posting prompts. So how to dig in and do research. Basically, it's a challenge that pulls apart a little bit of that content from Module 2 and gets them prepared.
Okay.
They don't need to take the course for it to be effective. It is a good standalone. So that's where I would send people.
All right. Give me that one more time. I'm gonna put it up on screen and make sure it ends up. So it's the Bloom by
bloombydelmanili.com
Okay. And then
/YBB challenge.
all right. So I have it up on screen if they're watching right now, and I will make sure that I get that link down in the description below. But head over there if you connected with Lucy and want to get onto selling your handmade stuff. It sounds like she's a great expert. 6 course launches. Not many people get to 6 course launches, so that means that despite the success she is seeing, she is investing back into her course and her students, and so she's someone you're going to want to be connected with. So thank you, Lucy. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and we will see you